Hello all you MMORPG loving cosmonauts, as always I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing the new sandbox MMORPG Albion Online, which is brought to you, published and developed by Sandbox Interactive. So I originally took a look at Albion Online way back in its alpha stage. The full game is now here, and it contains classless progression, things like player-driven economies. It's all centered around crafting. There's player-built cities, there's player housing, and there are also cross-platform support, so you can play the game on Windows, Mac, Linux, and mobile devices, iOS or Android. So let's get down into the game. The game basically, like I said, revolves around crafting, and that's basically the progression of the game. It's about crafting and going out, scavenging resources, bringing them back, crafting new gear, and then as you craft more and more of the same tier of gear, then you are able to then learn new tiers of gear, and then you're able to craft those. Now, the way that the progression system works in the game, it's on a destiny board. So each progression on that destiny board has a specific target. So for example, if you are a warrior and you're able to craft tier 1 warrior gear, you must craft a certain amount of tier 1 warrior gear to then progress to tier 2, which can lead to a massive, and I mean massive, grind. The same goes for combat progression. Killing a certain number of enemies will then allow you to get certain buffs and advantages. Like for example, if you do PvE, if you kill a certain number of tier 1 wearing enemies, then you are able to do 30% extra damage to tier 1 equipment wearing enemies after a certain amount of killing them. So this basically means that every action that you do within Albion contributes to your progression. There are no set classes, so if you progress, say, as a melee warrior, you can easily switch to ranged or, magic, depending on which way you want to go. But of course, it means that you must also go back and craft the things that you need. And if you haven't kept up with that crafting, it potentially means that if you get to tier 4 of warrior and then you suddenly decide this isn't really for me, you must start at tier 1 progression for, the mage items or the ranger items, that kind of thing. So again, the classless progression is a nice idea. I think that the execution within Albion, with that massive grind of crafting, is a really big issue. Now, I'm going to say this right at the start. I really don't like Albion Online, and it is a subjective reason, the fact that I don't really like crafting all that much. I enjoy crafting in MMORPGs as a side hobby, something to do. If there's a sword that I really like, then I will grind to be able to get that sword. But the fact that crafting is directly basically imbued into nearly every aspect of Albion Online just creates a grind that I find so tedious and just really overwhelming that it just became not fun in any kind of way for me. I think if you're the type of person who absolutely loves crafting, you live and breathe crafting, this is the perfect MMORPG for you, because crafting revolves around everything. If you don't like crafting, then you're not going to like any part of this game, because it all revolves around crafting. Now, that said, let's get into some of the other gameplay elements. So of course there's combat. Now, the combat in the game is fairly straightforward. You click on the enemy, and the way the ability system works is the fact that abilities are actually directly tied to gear versus having a skill set of your own that you can switch in and out, which means that, if you decided to switch from a melee focused warrior to a mage, then that switch depends on what your gear is. And so for example, a sword may have 3 abilities that you can choose from. You select one as your active ability, and that is your Q ability. It works very straightforward. I quite like the simplicity of the system, and I also like the customizability of the system, but at the same time, it also feels a little bit shallow at times, especially later on. You also have a full loot system and death system, which gets really interesting when it comes to the PvP aspect of the game. So when you PvP, if you die, you are dead and you lose all of your items that you have currently on you, which means that you can, if you kill someone in PvP, you can loot everything that they have on them, including their weapons and armor. That in itself holds, I would say, a mixed bag of good and bad. The good is that when you kill someone, you get a shit ton of loot. However, when you die or you get caught out in a PvP zone and you've just been, mining basically some really high level crafting stuff, and then someone or a guild just swoops in and destroys you, it can cause a lot of frustration, and it is not something that I particularly enjoy. And I also feel that that system within in and of itself is not necessarily a bad system, but it does promote things like ganking on a regular basis because it actively rewards people to go out and seek PvP and pick on people who are just there for the crafting materials versus they're also actively looking for PvP. So that can be a little bit of an issue from time to time. There are things that I certainly like about Albion. I like that you are able to craft your own housing. I like that guilds can get together and build their own cities. It's very rewarding. It can be fun to play with a group of other people. I think the problem is that I really didn't like the interface. I think the UI is god-awful in this game. It is totally just not intuitive. There are multiple issues with the user interface. The tutorial and the new player experience for the game is basically almost non-existent, and it's really bad. And then you have, a varying disadvantages versus advantages for the business model. You get founders that are going to get massive advantages over you. There's the time advantage, so if someone's got a lot more time than you, they're going to be able to progress a lot faster, which means that it will end up being, when it comes to the guild system, when guilds are competing for territory, what you're going to end up having is a few guilds that have more people online the majority of the time. They're going to be able to progress faster, they're going to be able to get better loot faster, which gives other guilds who don't have as much time commitment to give, they're going to be at a severe disadvantage. Lastly, I want you to touch on the graphics and the sound. Now, the graphics are, of course, a polygonal style that works well when you consider the cross-platform playability of the game, because of course if you're going to have cross-platform, it needs to be a art style and of a certain graphical fidelity that you're going to be able to run it well on an Android or mobile device. And that is very much the case. The game doesn't look bad necessarily, I just think it looks a little bit outdated from time to time. I don't think it's particularly eye-pleasing at any point. I think that especially for PC players, there's just not that much detail in there, and it would have been nice to have the option to really up the detail and up the graphical fidelity of the game for PC players and just keep it very simplistic for the mobile users, but that isn't the case. It's just basically set all around, and that is a little bit disappointing. There is also a odd color blend from time to time in certain zones where you can't really tell certain resources apart from another, and I don't think it's clear enough. And again, it comes back to a user interface issue that just the user interface in the game is just god awful. I think overall the sound works nice. It's got a nice soundtrack to it. There's not much in the way of voice acting or anything like that. So it is a bare bones experience when it comes to the audio visual side. Overall, for me, Albion Online is a miss, and I have to say that outright. It is a combination of objective and subjective issues that I have with the game. I really don't like the game's design at its core. I think that, subjectively, the focus on crafting and how that's tied to progression really puts me off, because it's triple the grind that it potentially would be in a traditional experience MMO. And then on top of that, you also have the inherent objective disadvantages for time commitment versus, founder packs, that kind of thing. So it's just a problem all around for me. I think that as a game that people can play on mobile, certainly it might be worth a look. I think if you love crafting, you'll definitely get a kick out of Albion Online. But I think if you're looking for a really core MMORPG experience, I think that potentially it definitely isn't here for Albion Online. And I was very disappointed with the game overall. And that is my review of Albion Online. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you next time.